Soy Cuba is a Soviet-Cuban anthology film directed by Mikhail Khalatozov in 1964. Each one of the tales told in the anthology is saturated in a revolutionary worldview. The interconnected melodramas of the film are like cinematic banners, demanding the liberation of the oppressed masses, but with compelling stories replacing slogans. In this video, I will explore how mise-en-scène is used in the first story to historicise the narrative and contextualise the personal tragedy of Maria as something intertwined with the tragedy of slavery. Furthermore, I will illustrate how the filmmaking we see on display is rooted in the motifs and tropes of Gothic fiction. Maria is an impoverished Afro-Cuban. She is reluctantly leading a double life working as a prostitute at a bar that caters to American tourists, despite being religiously devoted herself and betrothed to Rene, her fruit seller boyfriend. The decor in this bar is used to evoke Cuba's foundational legacy of slavery. The bar is decorated with sugar canes, which I argue connote slavery. Sugarcane was historically one of the main crops exported from the slave plantations of Cuba. Elsewhere in the film, the relationship between sugar production and oppression is made plain. One of the central paradoxes of the film is that sugar is sweet despite being soaked in tears. The narrator of the film, a personification of Cuba, delivers this line in an address to Christopher Columbus at the beginning of the film. A later episode in the anthology dramatizes the condition of a sugar farmer on the island. The hanging sugar canes serve as a visual cue that situate the exploitation of the bordello in the historical exploitation of the plantation. Additionally, in some shots, the sugar canes appear to be like cages, as if to suggest that there is an underlying sense of captivity beneath the surface-level festivities. Furthermore, the decoration and the entertainment in the bar are both immersed in African cultural symbolism. The opening shot is of two Afro-Cuban performers singing, juxtaposed with African masks and statues. The bar is filled with African statues, and during the final shot set at the bar, the camera lingers on an African statue. At one point, the bar is swarmed by masked dancers in traditional African dress. It is possible that there is more going on symbolically than just the evocation of Africanness, but I'm not clued up enough to identify any of the cultural artifacts. The mise-en-scène develops a subtext. The subtext emphasizes the perspective that Betty's drama is inseparable from the legacy of her ancestral subjugation as an Afro-Cuban. The sugarcane decorations and African cultural symbolism serve to show us the invisible chains shackling Maria and her people. The mise-en-scène that connotes slavery transforms the bordello into a sort of haunted house that wails with the anguished cries of tormented souls. The cinematic techniques used to examine the inheritance of guilt from the island's dark history can therefore be considered Gothic. As a motif, the statues in the bar are the Afro-Cuban equivalent of the spooky portraits of ancestors that hang on the walls of crumbling castles in European Gothic fiction. The decorations symbolize and totemize the unresolved sins of the past. There are a number of shots in this chapter that appear to be directly situating the story in the Gothic tradition. For example, this shot when they go to Maria's house, or this shot that introduces the women working as prostitutes in the bar. The personification of Cuba that narrates the film adds to the Gothic aesthetic of the anthology. The voice of Cuba presents the island as a beleaguered, betrayed, and conflicted entity that is tortured by the corruption on her soil and the tears that have been shed. The voice of Cuba has a sort of Miss Havisham-esque malaise that comes with having one's innocence shattered. On the following morning, Maria's customer is confronted by the disapproving glares of the Afro-Cubans that live in the slum, becoming lost in a labyrinth of manifested guilt.